Recording.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Uncanny Tracks. I am Bob in Cascadia. That is Matt in the Southland. And tonight we are wrapping up our coverage of Steve Orlando's Supergirl run with Supergirl Volume 3, Girl of No Tomorrow. That covers actually not very many issues, Matt. Issues 12 through 14 and annual number 1. How you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm doing great, Bob. Just realized that I put in the title that it was Girl of No Tomorrow. I'm confusing myself with Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King.
Yeah, Girl of No Tomorrow versus Woman of Tomorrow. Very
These are the problems we face, Bob, podcasting about comic books.
especially when you have both of our mild OCD tendencies and when it comes to organizing and labeling things.
Exactly. Quite confusing here, but it's okay. You told me, Bob, that we have 4 volumes to cover.
I lied, Matt. I lied. There is a fourth volume, and I didn't remember this Steve Orlando run very well at all, right? I remembered having a fairly positive attitude about it and thinking, as I was thinking of manageable amounts of Supergirl to cover before the movie, was the other thing that came to mind along with the Tom King thing. But actually, revisiting the fourth volume, I definitely don't think it's as good as the first 3 volumes. It brings on a bunch of co-writers. Steve Orlando's still co-writing, but it brings on a bunch of co-writers. Then it also doesn't really continue the story that the first 3 volumes are doing. Some of the subplots continue, but some don't. And the subplots that do continue aren't handled, I would say, in a very exciting way. Then this also brings up something. I feel you were a little confused and frustrated with this comic last week, Matt, when we were talking about volume 2 and when we were really getting into what's the new 52 versus what's post crisis. Am I remembering that you were a little frustrated with it?
That is absolutely correct, Bob.
I got to experience my version of that when I was reading volume 4 and starting to take notes on it, when I realized I had totally no idea why a bunch of post-crisis characters were showing up in the series when they shouldn't be showing up. It's not just that they're showing up, but they're showing up and there's little editorial notes boxes saying, hey, you can see what happened to this character in this issue of very late 90s or very early aughts Superman. And but that wouldn't be in continuity and this Supergirl wouldn't. So I don't know, Matt. I would fail in my obligation to the listeners of being able to explain continuity if we did volume 4. And also volume 4, yeah, not quite at the same level as the first 3 volumes.
So, what we're saying is that the 2 podcast hosts who were able to go through and cover Hickman's Avengers and explain that in complete detail and understand it, we struggle with what's going on with New 52, Rebirth, and DC Comics.
You're exactly right that Jonathan Hickman, at his most convoluted and his most operatic, has nothing on the confusions DC Comics content.
Bob, I blame that solely on DC editorial.
You're right, too. It's not Steve Orlando's fault. Steve Orlando, who's the writer of the Supergirl series, I don't love everything Orlando does, but he's a good writer. He has good taste. He's clearly a big Grant Morrison fan like we are. I will say something I've noticed about reading Steve Orlando's DC work in particular is I think Orlando is similar to our age, Matt, but I think in the late 80s and the 90s, he was just reading a whole different set of the DC universe than we were. When I tried to read his Justice League of America run from DC Rebirth, it was referencing all of these 80s and 90s characters that I just had barely ever heard of. I had no affection for, no knowledge of, context for. And it's not that the series was bad, but I don't have it in me to try to understand the microverse to appreciate this comic, right? That's an interesting thing about Orlando. And I don't think that's been a problem in the first 3 volumes of Orlando Supergirl, where he's mostly referencing 90s Superman triangle era stuff that you and I grew up with and enjoyed. But in the 4th volume, he's getting much more into the more esoteric corners of the DC universe that I don't, and you probably don't have any frame of reference for.
Way out in the weeds. I get too, Bob, that a lot of these people are trying to find that next character that's going to take off. That's part of what the writers do when they try to pull those little gems from the past. I'm thinking Peacemaker.
Yeah.
Think of characters like that. They've been plucked from nothingness and they're, oh, okay, they've been boosted to these higher levels. A lot of writers try to do that to see if they can get a character that's going to stick.
On the one hand, Peacemaker is a good example. But on the other hand, I had a Peacemaker card. If you remember those 90s gray bordered dealing cards, I had a Peacemaker card from that. I pretty much knew Peacemaker's deal because he was the model for the comedian in Watchmen, right? I don't like Peacemaker comics, but I don't like Peacemaker comics mostly because I don't think they're good, not don't understand the character.
Good.
Whereas Steve Orlando's Justice League of America run, he was bringing back a character from the 80s called Lady Quark, who I don't even know what her deal is. She has a whole team that I think was initially on another Earth and got moved into Earth Prime after the crisis. I have no idea what Lady Quark and her team's deal is. I could not even begin to explain it.
Lady Quark was big when Steve Orlando became a man, Bob. That's what it boils down
That Superman, I think first maybe villain, then maybe supporting character that was a woman. Her code name was Strange Visitor, but her real name I think was Sharon Ventura.
Okay, the Ventura sticks.
There's a very similar character in Marvel who also showed up in the 80s and was a Thing supporting character.
I am 100% thinking of that Sharon Ventura. Yes, that is who I'm picturing right now. Because we've talked about her on this podcast before. Wasn't she the She-Thing during...
Yeah, maybe the one in Marvel is Sharon Ventura, and maybe the one in DC is Sharon Vance. Maybe it's something like that.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Whoever this Sharon is, who is a Superman-level ally with the name Strange Visitor, and she was apparently killed in that crossover that I don't think either of us read it, but you probably remember it from the early aughts. It's like DC's 9/11 crossover, Our World's at War. I think Lois Lane's dad got killed in it.
Yes, I do remember that.
So she shows up in volume 4 of the Supergirl book, and it's given references to, oh yeah, she was killed in this issue of Our World's at War. But that didn't happen in the New 52. And I did more research, and I guess there's a couple points where they did bring the post-crisis continuity and merge it with the New 50. They did it in one of Snyder's metals. I don't know if it was metal or death metal. Then I think Jeff Johns did it in Doomsday Clock. So it's something that's happened 2 or 3 times, but it hadn't happened when this comic was coming out. So it's very confusing.
Based on my very quick look through this, Bob, Sharon Vance took on those electric boogaloo powers that Superman had in the late 90s. Some people have fond memories of those stories. It honestly made me stop collecting. To each his own, but they were terrible.
I haven't read much of that era other than what you did get before you gave up when we were kids. I do appreciate it because Electric Blue Superman and the Morrison JLA is sometimes cool. And it's referencing a Silver Age story, Superman Red, Superman Blue, that I like. That said, I never read the era, and I'm confident that your taste back when we were kids was probably right, and that era of Electric Blue Superman is probably not good.
It was right around the time when Superman actually married Lois.
I think it was a year or 2 after the wedding. One of the next big things after the wedding. I think you and I would ever have the stamina to do it for the podcast, but at some point I am going to try and read the Triangle era just to...
They sell it in volumes, I believe, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, 3rd omnibus of the Triangle era, which I think they're still not very far into it at all with 3 omnibuses, but I think a 3rd omnibus is out.
All right, Bob. So enough beating around the bush here with our Justice League Orlando talk.
Let's cover our 4 issues of Supergirl. So the first issue here is issue number 12. It's Girl of No Tomorrow, Part 1. Orlando, as we mentioned, is the writer. Robinson Roca is the artist. Matt, the big new plot development this issue number 12 is Cat Grant is launching a live stream app. That's not what they call it, but as far as I can tell, that's what it is.
We ended the last issue with a cliffhanger, Bob, where Supergirl is being shot by Cat Grant. I was like, oh, this is going to be crazy. And he tricked us. That was one of those crazy cliffhanger things he does.
Do you remember who it was revealed as actually disguised as Cat Grant when she shoots Supergirl? Selena, Matt, I didn't know this because unlike you, I've never seen the 84 Supergirl film, but apparently she's the main villain in the 84 Supergirl film, and this is the first time she's shown up in the comics as far as I can tell.
The character in this book does not look anything like the character in the film because she's some generic witch.
On the one hand, it's cool to bring back an obscure villain from the media into the Supergirl. On the other hand, you wonder if maybe having her and Emerald Empress on the same team, maybe that's a little bit too much, right? A little too similar.
They're way too similar, yes.
My favorite panel in issue number 12 is on page 10, where we have a very unsettling panel of Supergirl's heat vision, but then we're going ahead and jumping to Matt's favorite panel on page 12.
We get this awesome double-page spread, Bob, of all the Fatal Five and them announcing themselves as that team. So you've got Selena, Solomon Grundy, Emerald Empress, Magog, and Indigo.
Just to give listeners a little context, so Emerald Empress forms her own Fatal Five here, which when Emerald Empress is a Legion villain, she's the leader of the Fatal Five. The Fatal Five is a well-established team in Legion comics. I think this is the first time Supergirl has fought a Fatal Five when she's not with the Legion, but maybe I'm wrong. But I think it's the first time in a solo Supergirl comic she's fought the Fatal Five in a complicated way, both because this is set in the present and Legion comics are set in the 31st century, and also because we're on a new 52 DC Rebirth timeline where this is a new universe. This would technically make this the earliest incarnation of the Fatal Five.
Because of the way the timeline would be presented. However, I want to point out that Supergirl of the future is the reason they're here. They've come to the past because they want to stop whatever's going to happen in the future. It's implying that Supergirl will maybe go bad.
I'm not sure if this is supposed to be the same Emerald Empress as you see in the 30th century. In other continuities, it's established that the Emerald Eye of Ekron takes other hosts and makes them the Emerald Empress.
This comic points that out too.
You could read it maybe as anticipating Supergirl's involvement with the Fatal Five and the Emerald Eye of Ekron in 1,000 years, or like you're saying, you could read it as, oh, this Supergirl will go evil, which is something we've already seen this Supergirl do. Because in the prior New 52 Supergirl series, we see this version of Supergirl join the Red Lantern Corps and get possessed by her rage that Krypton's been destroyed. As far as I'm aware, and maybe I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, in this continuity, this Supergirl would not have had any contact with the Legion or with the 31st century to this point.
Do we ever get a payoff for this in the future?
As far as I can remember, we don't. But it's very easy that I might be forgetting something. This Supergirl series actually does continue after Orlando and his co-writers leave the book. So Volume 4 is not the last trade of the series. They relaunched the numbering of the trades, but not the numbering of the series. What would be Volume 5 is a heavy tie-in to the Brian Bendis run where he comes on Superman. You find out some guy with a name, the Superman equivalent of like Ra's al Ghul. You find out he blew up Krypton. So you have another kind of extreme version of Supergirl who gets a spear and is hunting the guy who blew up Krypton. So maybe that more extreme version of Supergirl somewhat pays into this prophecy, but honestly, I'm not sure.
Also, isn't there a Legion series dropping soon or something?
They are going to do a new Legion series. I think it's going to start this fall. Josh Williamson is going to be the writer and Hayden Sherman is going to be the artist. There have been rumors about that for a few months, but it was confirmed the other week. I haven't been reading the Josh Williamson Superman run. I was liking it at first, but a lot of crossovers hit and I fell off. There has been an evil version of the Legion of Superheroes in Josh Williamson's current Superman run, and Darkseid is controlling the Legion of Superheroes. So I assume that Josh Williamson's Superman run with Darkseid controlling the Legion is going to in some way inform or set up the new status quo when he starts a new Legion book in this fall or this winter.
That'll be great. Maybe they'll touch on Supergirl, but they probably won't. I'm sure they won't. Maybe even Steve Orlando, when he gets bored, he can go back and do a Legion comic, which I would read.
Orlando has somewhat settled in at Marvel since this. I think in this era, he was more settled in at DC and was doing Midnighter and Apollo, doing Justice League of America. Now he's more at Marvel and he's writing a Scarlet Witch book. He's writing a secondary Avengers book, things like that.
Looking back at these characters, I've got Selena, who I always said was from the film. We get that. She's brand new. Emerald Empress, we're very familiar with her from the Legion. Magog, we talked about last podcast episode.
He's the worst.
Solomon Grundy, he's famous. Batman villain. I feel I've fought him in video games more than I fought the Joker.
Definitely is a Batman villain, also a Green Lantern villain, and also frequently a Superman villain in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, he's everywhere. And you've got, of course, this other character that I don't know much about, Indigo.
I didn't remember Indigo at all, but I don't know if you remember, there's an early 2000s Outsider series, and Indigo is one of the new characters along with Grace and a couple of other characters that were introduced in that early 2000 Outsider series. And again, I'd totally forgotten this, but apparently the reveal of this is that Indigo is a cover program for Brainiac 8, and Brainiac 8 is using her to undermine the Outsiders. That's revealed. The Indigo program briefly takes control back and begs a teammate to kill her so she can't undermine the team anymore. The teammate does kill her in that Outsiders run, and that was the last time she was seen before they're reinventing her here for the Rebirth/New 52 universe.
She looks like a female Brainiac.
The reason Orlando wants to bring her in here, even though I didn't catch him playing into this, but obviously Supergirl and Brainiac 5 have a long-term romance in Legion comics, even though that hasn't happened to this version of Supergirl as far as I'm aware. Bringing in an evil version of a Brainiac is a gesture to that history.
We end with a pretty solid cliffhanger here.
So Supergirl confronts Solomon Grundy, who's been turned by Magog into a kaiju, a giant Solomon Grundy. And I had to ask, Matt, a kaiju Solomon Grundy, is that cool or stupid?
If you're fighting Supergirl, he has to get a little bigger.
To presumably go toe-to-toe with Superman or so. In general, as a purist of kaiju, I like my kaiju to be purely giant monsters, not people who are enlarged or embiggened to giant size. But there is a classic 1960s Japanese Frankenstein movie where Frankenstein is a kaiju, and that's in continuity with the 1960s, 1970s Godzilla movies, so I can't really complain about it too much. Moving on to Girl and No Tomorrow Part 2, Matt, that actually occurred in Supergirl Annual number 1, which you can laugh at me because I said there was no Supergirl Annual last time when we were looking at Supergirl Annual. The art on this one is by Steve Puh, and two pieces of art I want to draw our attention to. Neither are my favorite, but I thought they were both interesting images. We see Cameron Chase, who is a supporting character throughout this run. She has a knife and she's trying to stab the Emerald Eye on page 33. I thought that was pretty good. Then, even though, like you, I agree that Selena, not much to her in this run. She's a little redundant of Emerald Empress. Selena in this issue showing up and trolling and threatening and posing at Cat Grant. Then there's a very interesting image where Cat has to scrub the burn marks that Selena's portal left on her rug.
This issue wasn't annual. It's action-packed, constant action, and the facial expressions are drawn in a weird way. It's just a fun comic. There wasn't a whole lot of substance to this one. This annual was not my favorite.
I think you could say that in general. I think this is a pretty good climax to the run. It does feel a little light on substance compared to the first two trades.
When I went to go choose my favorite panel, and we both chose the same panel.
Yeah, what's your favorite panel?
Supergirl, she's in a sewer. There's something weird about it. It reminds me of Wolverine.
Though, is Supergirl is in shadows, then the colorist puts a green tinge on the sewers, a coloring that's carrying that panel.
It's a rare look to see Superman or Supergirl in a sewer.
But you're exactly right that it is putting Supergirl in a Wolverine pose.
We didn't leave out a part here. The idea is that Supergirl, her powers are crazy. She's got crazy power levels right now. She's having trouble controlling it. There's a lot of destruction going on. And during this destruction, it's revealed that Cyborg Superman, it's her father, so she's trying to keep him alive, trying to reform him. So anyway, the Emerald Eye blasts the back-to-tank Cyborg Superman.
Supergirl's powers are out of control. The public's not trusting her. The DEO has Cyborg Superman imprisoned, and if I'm recalling correctly, Supergirl goes to the Cyborg Superman, her father, or at least maybe her father, to both offer to help him again, but also because she thinks he might be able to help her with her out-of-control powers, right?
The public doesn't know that's her father and that the person that was destroying National City 2 volumes ago is being kept there. So it's revealed that they're hiding something, which is bad.
So somebody captures this on footage. I think it's Selena or somebody else from the Fatal Five, and they have it broadcast on Cat Grant's new live streaming app, right?
So it's a setup. The whole thing has been a setup to the Fatal Five trying to get Supergirl just destroy her character so that she doesn't destroy their future.
For the cliffhanger, the Emerald Eye then blasts Cyborg Superman, who's imprisoned by the DEO in this back-to-tank. This brings us into Girl of No Tomorrow Part 3, and it's also the final part of Girl of No Tomorrow, number 13. Robinson Roca is back on the art for this. And Matt, I was going to guess that your favorite panel in issue number 13, this final part of Girl of No Tomorrow, was when we have the Kryptonian werewolf that we saw back in the first volume deck Magog, and then Selena steals Magog's helmet and ditches him through a portal. I thought you'd like to see Magog get mogged.
Well, I loved watching Magog get handed to him by Selena. One crappy character defeating another crappy character is amazing. One-shot character. Magog, in my opinion, is a one-shot character. He was only in Kingdom Come. Anything else, he's in garbage.
Magog had a solo series. Selena can't say that.
Oh, yeah. Who read it? Did you? Get any Magog fans out there? Reach out to us on Twitter.
Hey, man, Magog had a run in Justice Society of America. I've never read it, but it sounds awful.
Why do people like Magog? God, he's so stupid.
really like Kingdom Come, and people really like the 90s. I don't answer to
Gross.
that.
That's a horrible character.
I'm not here to say that Selina's the best character ever or anything. She obviously isn't, but it's a little unfair to compare her to Maga.
Bob's this one-note characters. Let's compare to this other character that has all this history.
Selina's been in a movie, has Maga.
Oh yeah, that's a good one-upsmanship there with that. Selena does have the movie credit.
Speaking of one-off characters, Matt, my favorite panel in this issue was on page 73. We see Indigo mace Supergirl, and by mace Supergirl, I don't mean spray Supergirl. I mean turn her cyborg arm into a mace and eat Supergirl with that mace. I enjoyed that.
Bob, my favorite panel was 3 pages later on page 76, and this is something I have been waiting for since we did our Legion of Superhero coverage years ago with the cartoon. Man, Supergirl ripping apart the Emerald Eye. Jeez, man. That is exactly what needed to happen, and it's gross. It is disgusting.
One of the things I like about Orlando's Supergirl series is that he has Supergirl doing a lot of violence with her fingers. She's using her fingers to pry the Emerald Eye apart here. Then in an earlier volume, it was the first volume, we see her snap by the ear of a villain. I can't remember if it was Cyborg Superman or a different villain, but I like all the Supergirl finger violence in these comics.
She has a different style than Superman. I don't think we'd see Superman do that to the eye. He'd heat vision it or something.
There's something both subtle and sadistic about how Supergirl sometimes fights that I appreciate.
A little savage.
Speaking of new approaches to the Superman archetype, Matt, on page 80 in this last part of Girl of No Tomorrow, we see Cyborg's Superman's new look. He's naked. And this is after he rips off Indigo's mace arm.
He's not naked, Bob. He has a black Speedo on. What are you talking about?
Sorry, a new nearly naked look.
We're not kidding, listeners. Cyborg Superman, half of his body looks like skin. The other half looks like Herman Glob.
Oh, yeah, good call.
And his crotch is right in front of Supergirl's head, which is awful. But he's got a black Speedo thing in there.
Especially, but not only, because that's probably her dad.
That makes it worse. And he's also holding that severed hand of Indigo's, which makes it even stranger. But if you look, Bob, even on the other little panel, they show him from behind. He's got it going up his back, too.
I've mentioned a couple times this is the final part of the arc. So it sets up some new status quos for the final trade of the Supergirl series. And one of those new status quos is that Cameron Chase has been outed from the DEO because of I think it's her secret imprisonment of Cyborg Superman.
Yeah.
So Cameron Chase is hitting the road, and she's hitting the road with Lar-On, the Kryptonian werewolf. And did you get the feeling as you see Chase and Lar-On in this muscle car driving down the desert highways of America? Are they going to do a Magnum PI or a Route 66 remake with Cameron Chase and Lar-On?
It does not sound entertaining to me. I got tired of Lar-On's thing. I like the idea of a Kryptonian werewolf. That's cool. Cameron Chase is boring.
Cameron Chase has been good in other comics, but I do not think that Orlando found a way to really make her work well in this series. I would agree with you. And some of these subplots get dropped. Chase and Lar-On, if I'm recalling correctly, do get brought back basically just for the climax of the fourth trade as well. So we don't actually get an issue that's them solving a mystery in a deserted Southwest town, which would have maybe been more fun than what we did get from the next volume of this series.
It probably would not have sold any books.
The cliffhanger for this, which we won't really take up, but it does feed into the next volume, is that because Cameron Chase is out at the DEO, Mr. Bones takes over the DEO, and now the world and Cat Grant hate Supergirl. Cat Grant is plotting to further discredit Supergirl and enlisting Kara and Ben, her employees, to do that for her.
Let me just ask you this first. Pretend I have not read 30-something years of comic books. Can you tell me who Mr. Bones is?
I don't know that much about him, but basically he's a former supervillain. He was a villain of Infinity Inc., the kids of the Justice Society in that 80s book. At some point, Mr. Bones reformed. Then he was an ally, maybe a member of Infinity Inc. in the 80s. And at some point, he became the director of the DEO. If I'm remembering correctly, in the late 90s Cameron Chase book, where she was first introduced, she was already working for Mr. Bones in that book, but it has been 15 years. So forgive me if I have the details of that wrong, listeners. In a way, Mr. Bones taking over the directorship is just a restoration.
Is Mr. Bones sort of like this obscure character thing you were mentioning earlier in the podcast?
No, Mr. Bones is more the equivalent of Amanda Waller and Nick Fury.
Okay.
He's not as prominent as they are, but he's pretty prominent. He just happens to be more in things that you haven't read, like Chase and the Justice.
He looks like Black Mask. or Red Skull, but not.
To Mr. Bones' credit, he might predate Black Mask. I think they're both early 80s characters. He has a little bit more of a power and a little bit more of a physical mutation thing going on than Black Mask does. I can't remember how much he says in this comic, but Mr. Bones has a cyanide touch. So if he touches anybody, they die, basically.
Okay. So he's like Phosphorus guy, Dr. Phosphorus.
He might predate Black Mask. He's very much, what if you merged Dr. Phosphorus and Black Mask, then made him the director of the CIA?
I have a complete understanding of Mr. Bones now, Bob. Thank you. Now I need a complete understanding of Jor-El. Because last episode you told me that he goes by the name Mr. Oz, and that's actually Jor-El.
This is the big focus in the Superman books in Rebirth. I forget some of the specifics. He's the one who I think is indirectly responsible for aging up John Kent in the Superman Rebirth books. But I think when one is reading this Supergirl comic, I don't think one yet knows that Mr. Oz is Jor-El. But Jor-El, aka Mr. Oz, shows up and just murders Cyborg Superman, who is supposed to be his brother.
Yeah, this is crazy.
And Jor-El slash Mr. Oz, I think, doesn't deny that Cyborg Superman is his brother, but kills him. I have read Rebirth Superman, but I don't remember the specifics, and maybe this pays off a little bit more in the Rebirth Superman books. Maybe not. I couldn't tell you.
So this last issue of this volume.
This is issue number 14. It's the last issue of Orlando's Supergirl we're going to cover. It's called Heaven to Earth. The artist is a fill-in artist named Jose Luis. Matt, we get a little bit of teasing of Streaky the Super Cat. We get an appearance of another Rebirth era Superman character who is, I think, still around in the current Superman books, although it's been a couple years. I fell off the current Superman books, but I think he's still around. I don't know if you're very familiar with him, but basically we have a big team up where it's Supergirl and Kong Kenan, who's the Superman of China. Somebody who's arguably less cool is we have a mentor figure in this issue, number 14. This is I Ching. Have you ever come across I Ching before?
Oh, yeah. He's very stereotypical.
He was created by Denny O'Neil, and some of Denny O'Neil's work with Asian characters in the early 70s is a bit stereotypical. I think in the early 70s, Denny O'Neil had the best of intentions with that. I'm not saying that good intentions excuse it, but I'm also not here to be, 50 years later, I know so much better.
No, yeah.
But I Ching is a stereotypical Chinese martial arts mentor figure created by Denny O'Neil. He's named after the famous divination text. But interestingly, he is used by Denny in the early 70s to train both Wonder Woman and Superman. He's spiritual and cringy in the early 70s. Do you remember that Kryptonite Nevermore story from the early 70s that covers the famous image of Superman busting the chain?
Yeah.
That's the first cover of that story when Denny O'Neil takes over Superman in the early 70s. And over the course of that series, Superman has to fight an evil version of himself that's a sand monster. As I recall that story, I don't think it's that great. It is historical.
Again, that's stupid, but it's okay. Because I know if I read it, I'd enjoy it. But the description of it is, he's going to fight a Sandman. The only way he can do it is if he gets trained by the I Ching and martial arts.
An evil sand version of himself.
Oh, sorry, an evil sand doppelganger. Yes. The only way to defeat the evil sand doppelganger is for the I Ching to train him in martial arts. Yes,
because the power levels are roughly equivalent. He's the edge of I Ching's training. Then, do you remember in the 70s when Wonder Woman ditches the classic outfit?
The leather jacket and all the crap, yes.
If I'm remembering the plot of that, she loses, the amulets and whatnot, the Amazonian powers. So she has to get some training for I Ching before she spends 3 or 4 years as a super spy. We see I Ching in this issue training Supergirl as he trained Wonder Woman and Superman in the 70s. So it is a little bit of a loving tribute to those silly but influential and interesting comics from the early 70s. I'd say my favorite panel from this issue is page 97. We see Supergirl and Kong Kenan catching Mongolian bullets to save a Rocket Red, which was a pretty good image.
It was beautifully drawn. Great. It's got that classic of they're coming in to swoop in to save the day. You think it's just going to be Supergirl, but then you got him there at the front, too. My favorite panel was on page 102, Bob. It's when Rocket Red's armor is shattered by Supergirl's ice breath. Thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's the irony of using ice breath against the Russian.
One interesting thing they did in this issue, Bob, is they used different text color for the speech for the different languages.
Yeah, I'm glad you flagged that. That is a cool thing.
I haven't seen that before because I knew they were going to go for some miscommunication without having to spell it out for us.
You've got Supergirl speaking English and a little bit of Chinese. You've got Kong Keenan speaking Chinese and English. Then you've got the Rocket Red speaking Russian, and I think Supergirl speaks a little bit of Russian. And then the Rocket Red is crashed in Mongolia, so the soldiers are speaking Mongolian. So you got 4 different languages in play. Yeah.
And each one has a different color to represent what the language is. That's the most interesting part about this comic.
Sure.
All right, the cliffhanger, Bob, in this issue.
We're back in National City, and I already basically said this earlier, but Cat Grant really doesn't like Supergirl now. And so she's got Supergirl's Jimmy Olsen, Ben Rubel, and she's got Supergirl's civilian identity, and she's going to make Ben and Kara conspire against Supergirl to show the world how evil and bad Supergirl is. That's our cliffhanger. That's somewhat picked up on in the 4th trade, but not as much as you would think. I would say to listeners, I know Matt's taste well, so I'm assuring him that I do not think he would enjoy Volume 4. I don't think Volume 4 is absolutely wretched by any means. Some of our listeners might enjoy it. You should go ahead and read it. I just don't enjoy it that much, and I don't feel equipped to talk about it, which is why we're not. Also, there's Atlantis stuff a little bit in it. I know Matt's feelings about it. All right, Matt, 2 questions to close out on. One, so would you rank the trades in this series Reign of the Cyborg Superman, Girl of No Tomorrow, which is the one we're covering now, then Escape from the Phantom Zone, the second one, which I know you didn't really care for?
I would agree with that for sure. Reign of the Cyborg Superman is probably the better book, the best of book of the 3. Orlando comes in real strong with that, and I think that was the big story he wanted to tell. The second volume, Escape from the Phantom Zone, I like that. Yeah, she teams up with Batgirl. That's cool. And this one I liked for the most part, but it was just a big fight book with the Fatal 5. I think the nostalgia of the Fatal 5 for me, knowing that they were in the Legion stuff we'd watched in the past, really made it more entertaining for me. The introduction of all those different characters too, bringing Selena in was cool. And I know we made fun of it this podcast, but bringing in an actual villain from a movie that you could have Supergirl be pitted against, because who is her archenemy? I don't know. Or I'm going to go ahead and just say it's Selena.
It depends on the version. I think the Matrix Supergirl in the 90s has her archenemy. And based on the Tom King book and what it looks like they're doing with the movie, I guess you would have to say the Brigand.
It's just you don't have a Lex Luthor or a Joker for Supergirl.
The CW show does introduce a Lex Luthor equivalent for Supergirl who works pretty well in the current Supergirl series by Jody Hauser, which we might do when that series is done, listeners. We usually like to wait till a series is done before we do them, unless it's Batman and Matt gets impatient.
But gotta get that Batman out when it's topical.
Get that Batman. But I think they're using her Lex Luthor equivalent in that series. Matt, I would somewhat disagree with your ranking just because, as we established last time, I liked Escape from the Phantom Zone a lot more than you. So I think I would rank these 3: Escape from the Phantom Zone, Reign of the Cyborg Superman, then Girl of No Tomorrow.
All right. So, Bob, now we got to rank these for our ranking. So what are we thinking here?
All right, Matt. My proposal to you would be that I think this is not as good as the Black Knight series we covered recently by Cy Spurrier and Sergio Davila. And then I think it's better than Superman Meets the Fantastic Four. So on our currently 39 item list, if we went with my suggestion, that would put it as the new number 28 in between Black Knight and Superman versus FF. But if you want it higher or lower, I'm not super set on that.
Directly below Superman versus FF is what, Bob?
Fantastic Four, 1, 2, 3, 4, which I think this is still better than.
I don't know if I can put this above Grant Morrison.
But as we talked about on the show, that's probably Grant's worst Marvel or DC comic.
Yeah, it is. It's totally their worst. Okay. Yeah, go ahead and stick it after, put it the new one there. That's fine. The Grant Morrison thing, though, you do make a good point. That is their worst work that I have read.
There's a lot of other Grant Morrison stuff that, if we get to, would be higher than the Steve Orlando run on Girl. And also look at it this way. It's fairly clear from Orlando's work that he's a big fan of Grant Morrison. So think of how happy he would be to have one comic above a Grant Morrison comic.
How about
even
that?
If it is the worst Grant Morrison comic.
How do you think he feels about being higher than Lieberman?
I think he doesn't even think about AJ Lieberman at all. And I don't think anybody should, to be
I
honest.
think we're the only ones who think about AJ Lieberman.
And that's only because we read those comics at a very impressionable.
Thanks, AJ Lieberman.
I would say I don't have anything to thank him for, but after reading Hattush, actually, thank you, AJ Lieberman. You did better than Hattush. I appreciate that.
That is correct. I go off on this little tangent, folks, but Steve Orlando's a great writer. I appreciate Bob. Thanks for exposing me to Steve Orlando's work.
It's someday we will do Steve Orlando's Midnighter and Apollo, which are really good comics, and will go not at the top of this list, but they'll go much higher than Orlando's Supergirl for sure. All right, listeners, thanks for joining us on this 3-issue jaunt through Steve Orlando's Supergirl. We will probably cover the Supergirl movie, although we'll just have to see. We're pretty soon going to be moving into coverage of X-Men 97, Star Trek Strange New Worlds. We'll keep checking in with comics when we can. We might have some Spider-Man stuff coming soon. We'll probably check in on the DC Absolute Universe soon. So keep listening to Uncanny Treks. I'm Bob in Cascadia. That's Matt in the Southland. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks for listening.